There are days when silence feels easier, when speaking hurts, and holding everything in hurts even more. I spent 3 weeks like that in my small home here in the US, surrounded by invisible distance, small misunderstandings, and a tired attempt at practicing English. But then, in the softest moments, I learned that communication isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about speaking honestly. This video is my quiet journey through love, healing, and meaningful connection. 3 weeks of change. You know, it's strange how 3 simple weeks can quietly reshape the way you look at love, at communication, and even at the English words you try to say every day. If someone had stopped me on the street 3 weeks ago here in the United States and asked, "How's life? How's marriage?" I probably would have smiled politely, because that's what adults do, while my mind whispered, "Honestly, I don't know." There's something about routine that makes you feel safe, but it also has a sneaky way of making you forget to pay attention. And that's exactly where I was, living, moving, functioning, but not really noticing the small shifts happening inside my home. That IT started with the tiniest things. A distracted "I'm fine," a half-hearted "good night," a soft sigh from across the room that wasn't angry, but wasn't happy either. You might think those things don't matter, but hearts are sensitive. They pick up what ears sometimes ignore. And the funny part? All of this was happening while I was trying to practice English listening every evening, watching videos, repeating sentences, yet failing to listen to the person sitting right next to me. One morning, while I was pouring coffee into a mug that suddenly felt heavier than usual, I realized something unsettling. I was talking around my partner, not to them. You ever have that moment? When you realize you're speaking automatically, like reading a script you didn't write. My sentences were short. My tone was flat. And the space between us felt like a hallway with the lights turned off. Not hostile, just dim. That realization stayed with me the entire day. It followed me as I drove to the store, as I stood in the cereal aisle pretending to choose between flavors I didn't even want, and even as I tried to practice English pronunciation in the car, repeating phrases like "take your time" and "listen carefully." Ironically, the exact things I wasn't doing in my own home. Life has a sense of humor like that. But here's the beautiful part. When you start noticing even just a little, your heart makes room for change. That day, instead of scrolling on my phone like I usually did, I sat on the couch and simply watched the sunlight move across the floor. It sounds poetic, but it was just quiet. A quiet that made me feel honest with myself again. And I realized something soft but important. Communication isn't always about talking. Sometimes it begins by slowing down enough so your emotions can catch up to your words. And that slow shift, gentle, almost invisible, became the beginning of these 3 meaningful weeks. Not dramatic, not dark, not full of tears, just real. Just human. Just the kind of change you only see when life finally gets quiet enough for you to hear your own heartbeat again. A soft start to the day. Some mornings feel ordinary, and some mornings feel like they're quietly trying to tell you something. 3 weeks ago, I had one of those mornings, the kind where the world outside is still half asleep, and the only sound in the house is the soft hum of the refrigerator and the small cracking noises the walls make when they're adjusting to the temperature. It wasn't dramatic or romantic. It was just a calm beginning. But it gently opened my eyes to something I had been ignoring for too long. I woke up earlier than usual that day. Not because I set an alarm, but because my mind was too full to stay asleep. You know the feeling when you wake up not from rest, but from thoughts that refuse to wait until morning. I sat at the edge of the bed for a minute listening, not to words but to the atmosphere around me. There's a different kind of silence in a home shared with someone you love. It's warm, but it also carries things you don't say out loud. As I stepped into the kitchen, the sunlight was just beginning to spill across the countertop, soft and pale. I poured myself a glass of water, and for a moment, the simple act felt like a small reset button. I breathed slowly. I paid attention. And in that quiet space I realized something. These simple moments is where communication really starts. Not in long conversations, not in big emotional speeches, but in the stillness that teaches you to listen. That morning, while waiting for the kettle to boil, I practiced a few English phrases under my breath. Nothing special, just light, simple lines like, "Good morning. How are you feeling today? Do you want coffee?" It's funny how these tiny beginner-level phrases suddenly felt meaningful when I thought about saying them to my partner. Not as habit, but as genuine connection. Sometimes the English you practice becomes the emotional vocabulary you need in your real life. When my partner finally walked into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, wearing that old t-shirt I secretly love, I felt something shift in my chest. Not guilt, not regret, just a soft awareness. The way they nodded at me, the quiet smile, the small unspoken invitation to start the day together. It reminded me that relationships aren't rebuilt through big decisions. They're rebuilt through morning greetings, shared coffee, small kindnesses, and the way you choose to be present. We didn't talk much that morning. Just simple, gentle words that felt like the first baby steps of a new beginning. And that's when I understood. Healing doesn't always arrive like a wave. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper, asking you to slow down and pay attention. That soft morning didn't solve everything, but it planted the first seed. And seeds, when cared for, quietly become something beautiful. Small miscommunications. Miscommunication is such a strange thing. It rarely arrives loudly. Instead, it slips into your day like a tiny grain of sand, so small you barely notice it, until suddenly everything feels slightly uncomfortable, slightly off, slightly harder than it should be. During these past 3 weeks in the United States, that's exactly what happened between me and my partner. Nothing dramatic. No shouting. No slamming doors. Just little misunderstandings that slowly built walls neither of us meant to build. It happened in the simplest moments. I'd say something short because I was tired, and they'd interpret it as irritation. They'd respond quietly because they didn't want to bother me, and I'd misread it as distance. You know how it goes. Two people trying their best but somehow missing each other by just 1 emotional inch. And that 1 inch is all it takes for love to feel unfamiliar. One evening, I remember asking, "Are you okay?" It was a normal question, nothing special. But my tone was flat. My mind was tired. And the English words came out without warmth. They replied, "Yeah, I'm fine." But their voice had a softness that didn't match the words. If you've ever practiced English listening long enough, you know this. Tone tells the truth long before vocabulary does. I heard the difference, but I didn't know how to ask again, so we both just let it go. And letting it go became a habit. A few days later, I realized we were speaking in short sentences, almost like two beginners practicing English at a cafe table, going through the motions but not really connecting. Did you eat? I'll be home later. Okay. Good night. Minimal words. Minimal emotion. Maximum guessing. It's funny how you can live with someone and still feel like you're only catching subtitles of their feelings. And honestly, the more I practiced English in my alone time, repeating sentences, listening to slow speech, focusing on intonation, the more I noticed the irony. I was training my ears but not listening to the person who mattered most. The human brain is weird like that. It prioritizes tasks over meaning when it's tired, and it tunes out emotional signals when stressed. Miscommunication grows exactly in that gap. The turning point came during a small moment, so small I almost missed it. I accidentally dropped a glass in the kitchen. It didn't break. It just rolled onto the floor. But the sound startled both of us. They rushed in and asked, "Are you okay?" The same question I had asked days before. But this time their voice carried genuine worry, softness, presence. It wasn't the English grammar that reached me. It was the feeling behind the words. And in that moment, something became clear. Communication isn't the words you say. It's the emotional frequency beneath the words. Sometimes our grammar is perfect, but our hearts are silent. Sometimes our vocabulary is limited, but our feelings speak fluently. Those tiny misunderstandings didn't disappear instantly. But noticing them, really seeing them, was the first quiet step toward healing. A conversation that mattered. Some conversations arrive gently but leave a mark so deep that you keep replaying them long after they end. Mine happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon, in a tiny local park near my home here in the United States. Nothing fancy, just a bench, a small lake, and a breeze that felt like it had something to say. I didn't go there looking for clarity. Honestly, I just needed to breathe. But life has a way of placing the right person beside you at exactly the right moment. I was sitting alone, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching ducks glide across the water, when an older American man sat down a few feet away. He had that calm, grounded presence people get when they've lived through enough storms to stop fearing the clouds. After a few minutes, he smiled and said, "You look like you're carrying more thoughts than that cup can hold." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. He introduced himself, nothing formal, and asked if everything was okay. Normally, I would have deflected. But something about that moment, the honesty of it, the quiet around us, made me answer honestly. I told him I'd been struggling with communication lately, both in my marriage and in my own head. He nodded slowly, as if he had already heard the same story 100 times. Then he said something simple, but it landed in me like a soft thunder. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. And that's when love gets tired. Those words sat in the air between us, calm and heavy. I repeated them silently in English like a listening exercise I didn't want to fail. Listen to understand. It sounded so basic, but my heart knew it wasn't something I had been practicing. Not with my partner, and honestly not even with myself. He went on. You don't fix communication by speaking more. You fix it by hearing the sentence behind the sentence. I let that sink in. It reminded me of how we practice English listening. Slow down, catch the tone, pay attention to the pauses, notice what isn't said. That's when comprehension actually happens. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Nothing dramatic, just warm human conversation. He told me about his late wife, how they once went a whole week barely talking because they both assumed the other was upset. Turns out, he said with a bittersweet smile, we were both just tired. I felt that deeply. I had been tired too, emotionally, mentally, linguistically. The strange thing? He didn't give me advice. He just shared pieces of his story. And those pieces gently rearranged something inside me before leaving. He added one last sentence, delivered slowly, almost like he wanted me to practice it. When you listen with patience, love finds its way back. That line stayed with me. I repeated it softly as I walked home, like a mantra, like an English phrase I wanted to memorize, but more than that, a reminder that listening is sometimes the purest form of love. That conversation didn't solve my problems, but it gave me the clarity I didn't know I needed. Finding each other again. There's a quiet kind of courage in trying again, especially with someone you love. And in the days after that conversation at the park, something inside me softened. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just enough for me to look at my partner with a gentler kind of attention. You know that moment when you finally stop wanting to win and start wanting to understand? That's where I found myself. And that tiny shift changed the entire atmosphere of our home. It began with small gestures. A slower good morning. A real smile instead of a polite one. A question asked with curiosity instead of routine. My partner noticed it, of course they did. When you live with someone long enough, you feel their emotional temperature before they say a single word. And for the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt breathable. One evening after dinner, we sat together on the couch, not scrolling, not distracted, just existing side by side. There was a softness in the air, the kind that invites honesty without fear. I took a deep breath and said, I think I haven't been listening well lately. My voice was quiet, almost fragile, but it was real. They turned to me with a gentle expression, not surprised, not defensive, just open. Me too, they said. Two simple words, but they landed with the weight of truth. And right there it felt like the imaginary walls between us took a small step back. We started talking slowly, like two people learning a new language together. Short sentences, pauses, careful expression. And isn't it interesting? That's exactly how we practice English listening and speaking. Patiently, mindfully, without rushing to be perfect. Love works the same way. At one point they said, sometimes I didn't know what you needed. And I replied, sometimes I didn't know how to say it. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. And honesty, when spoken gently, is a form of healing. We talked about the small misunderstandings of the past weeks, not to reopen wounds but to understand the spaces where we missed each other. I realized something beautiful in that moment. Love doesn't require big speeches. It just needs clear presence, a warm tone, a patient pause, a willingness to hear the feeling behind the words. It reminded me of an English phrase I once practiced. Speak slowly. Listen fully. At the time it felt like a language exercise. Now it felt like a life exercise. As the night grew quieter, I leaned closer, and my partner rested their head on my shoulder. No apology could have spoken louder than that gentle gesture. It said, "We're still here. We're still choosing each other." And sometimes that's all you need. That night didn't fix everything, but it stitched the first piece of us back together. And maybe that's how people fall back into love, not with fireworks but with small steady steps toward each other. When love speaks in the smallest moments. During the sixth part of this journey, I want to take you into the smallest, quietest moments of the past 3 weeks, because that's where real love hides. Not in big surprises, not in perfect days, but in the soft pieces of ordinary life that almost slip by unnoticed. And strangely, those moments also became the best lessons for practicing real-life English. Simple, human, everyday phrases that keep a relationship alive. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The kind of afternoon where the house feels sleepy, sunlight rests on the floor, and time moves slower than usual. I was folding laundry, nothing special, nothing romantic. Just shirts, towels, socks. My partner walked into the room, paused, and without saying anything started helping. No complaints. No sighs. Just presence. That's when I realized something. In marriage, help isn't just helped, it's a sentence without words, a quiet, "I'm with you." I whispered a simple English phrase I had been practicing. "Thank you for being here." Not dramatic. Not poetic. Just honest. My partner smiled. "You're welcome." And that tiny exchange warmed something inside me that had been cold for weeks. Later that evening, we cooked dinner together. The kitchen became our little universe. Sizzling pans, the smell of garlic, our shoulders brushing as we moved around each other. We weren't talking about big problems or trying to fix everything. Sometimes healing begins when you stop forcing in moments like these. I learned another powerful English phrase. "I appreciate you." It's simple, but in American culture, appreciation is like sunlight. It keeps relationships growing. In these 3 weeks, saying that phrase out loud taught me more about emotional connection than any grammar book ever could. After dinner, we sat on the couch with 2 cups of tea. The steam rose into the quiet living room. It felt peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. My partner leaned their head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for trying." That sentence almost broke me. Because love isn't about fixing everything instantly. It's about showing up. Even when you don't feel strong. Even when you're tired. Even when part of you wants to give up. And that's what this section is really about, the daily English of love, patience, and rebuilding. I'm here. Let's take it slow. We'll figure it out. These aren't just phrases for language practice, they're anchors. They keep you from drifting apart when life gets heavy. So as you listen, read, and speak along with this video, I want you to feel something deeper. That even in your own quiet moments, even in your hardest weeks, you are not alone. Love grows slowly. English grows slowly. Healing grows slowly. And all 3 begin in the smallest moments. The words we didn't say and the ones we finally did. There's a moment in every relationship where silence becomes heavier than words. During these 3 weeks in the US, I found myself standing inside that silence, unsure of what to say, afraid of saying the wrong thing, yet wanting so badly to reach the person I love. And strangely, that tension became one of the most meaningful lessons of this entire listening, reading, speaking journey. It happened late at night, long after the noise of the day had settled. The house was quiet, the city outside felt distant, and for the first time in a while my heart wasn't racing, it was listening. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands cold, rehearsing simple English phrases in my mind the way you rehearse courage. I'm sorry if I made you feel alone. I didn't mean to hurt you. Can we start again? They seem like small sentences, but in a fragile moment, small words can feel like lifting a mountain. My partner walked into the room. The soft light from the hallway framed their silhouette. They looked tired, emotionally tired, the kind of tired you can't sleep away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It wasn't anger holding us back. It was fear. Fear of honesty. Fear of breaking something already cracked. Then I exhaled, looked up and said quietly, I miss us. That sentence, 3 simple English words, carried 3 weeks of weight. My partner sat next to me. Their voice barely a whisper. I miss us too. And just like that, the silence shifted. Not gone, but softer. Gentler. That we didn't solve everything that night. Real relationships rarely work that way. Instead, we did something more important. We talked about the words we wanted to say but hadn't. The things we kept inside because we didn't want to argue, didn't want to burden each other, didn't want to admit we were hurting. And that quiet space, we shared sentences that felt like opening windows after weeks of stale air. I didn't know how to tell you I needed help. I thought you were upset with me. I was scared you were pulling away. Little by little, the room filled with honesty. Not perfect grammar. Not perfect pronunciation. Just truth. And here's the part connected to this video's purpose. When you learn English through real life, through love, conflict, disappointment, forgiveness, the language becomes more than vocabulary. It becomes a bridge. A way to stay close. A way to stay human. As we talked, I realized something powerful. The most important English phrases in a relationship aren't complex. They're simple, emotional, and real. I hear you. You matter to me. Let's keep trying. That night ended the way difficult nights sometimes do. Slowly, quietly, with 2 people holding on to hope more than certainty. We fell asleep not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally spoken. And that's what Section 7 is about. The words we didn't say, and the ones we finally found the courage to speak. Learning to love again, one quiet day at a time. As these 3 intense weeks in the US slowly came to an end, something unexpected began to happen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in a way that felt gentle, almost shy. It was as if our relationship, bruised but still breathing, was learning how to stand again. And the miracle wasn't in one big breakthrough. It was in the slow return of small things we had forgotten to notice. The first change came one morning when my partner placed a cup of warm tea on my desk without saying a word. It wasn't the tea that mattered. It was the thought behind it, soft, simple, human. Sometimes love rebuilds itself through gestures that last only a few seconds, but stay in your heart for days. I whispered a phrase I had practiced over and over again in my English listening exercises. This means a lot to me. My partner smiled, and for the first time in weeks, that smile reached their eyes. Throughout that week, the house felt different. Not louder. Not filled with constant conversation. Just safer. We were talking more gently, moving around each other with more care. I found myself saying small English phrases that once felt awkward but now felt natural. I'm here with you. Take your time. We'll figure it out together. And surprisingly, those simple sentences didn't just help us reconnect. They strengthened my English more than any textbook ever did. Because when you use language in moments filled with emotion, the words stay with you. They become part of you. One evening, we sat on the porch and watched the sky turn from gold to blue to quiet darkness. The air was cool, and the sound of distant traffic blended with the soft rustle of trees. It felt like the world was reminding us that everything moves in cycles. Even relationships. Even healing. My partner gently broke the silence. Do you think we're getting better? I looked at them, feeling the fragile hope between us, and answered honestly, yes, slowly. But yes. That's when I realized what these 3 weeks had given me. Not perfection, not certainty, but a deeper understanding of love. Real love doesn't rush. It doesn't demand dramatic change. It grows quietly in the spaces where both people choose each other again and again. And that's the heart of this final section. Love and language share the same rhythm. Both are learned slowly. Both get stronger through daily practice. Both are built on patience, attention, and courage. If you're watching this video because you want to improve your listening, reading, or speaking skills, I want you to remember this. You are not just learning English. You are learning how to express your heart more clearly, how to understand others more deeply, how to stay connected even when life pulls you in different directions. So as these 3 weeks end, I carry one lesson with me, simple, soft, unforgettable. Healing begins with small words, and love grows when we choose to speak them.